Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, I wanted to start off with an animation, sun up to sundown yesterday on Sunday. And what's great about this animation is it shows us kind of an important time of year. We just had over the weekend our winter solstice for the Northern Hemisphere. And remember, the word solstice means sun stop. And what that means for this particular day is that the sun made its farthest southern progression in the southern hemisphere to 23.5 degrees south, where its rays were perpendicular to the Earth's surface at that latitude. Now, what will be happening over the next 6 months is that the sun's rays will become more and more direct toward the equator first and then into the northern hemisphere before they stop again on June 21st. And why I'm showing you this is I got asked a great question yesterday about the length of day changing. And unfortunately, well, for where I live here in and around Champaign, Illinois, it's about 40 degrees north, 88 west. Well, this graph shows us that this time of year we have just barely over 9 hours of daylight, and whereas on the June solstice or the summer solstice for the northern hemisphere we have over 15 hours of daylight. Now, the most rapid accumulation of daylight hours for us, which is to the tune of about 3 minutes a day, happens right in through here, February through May. But right now, if you come down here to the flat part of this curve, we're only gaining seconds a day. So I'm sorry, even though we're on the rebound, here it is, just a few seconds a day of additional daylight. Okay, from there, let's just take a look at the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation, because over the weekend, parts of the southeast saw some very heavy rainfall. Now, this map combines the heavy rainfall we saw a week ago with what we just had over the weekend, and that tells us the parts of Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia picked up some very, very heavy rain. Now, we will be seeing South Carolina take the main brunt of the heavy rainfall later on today and early tomorrow. But other than that, much of the southeast is going to get several days to kind of dry out after this, as is the midsection of the United States. We also saw one of our atmospheric rivers target parts of Washington and Oregon, and some locations there easily picking up 6 to 10 inches of rainfall. And the trough that caused that is slowly sliding down here into the desert southwest. We're going to be talking about some heavy rainfall and some snow here. But meanwhile, the midsection of the United States, at least through much of this week, gets a relatively dry week. And that's because the jet stream has these two main features. One is here, and that's going to target this section right down here of the U.S. with the heaviest precipitation. And the main jet stream flow goes right over the top, as you can see here, of this cutoff low that's sitting here over parts of the southeast. And that's where the main show is going to be here, at least through the next few days. So let's kind of take a look at this and show you what those winds are going to be, because I told you it's going to be South Carolina that I'm most concerned about for having the heaviest rainfall today. But all around this low that's sitting here and spinning some very strong winds, which is why the all hazards weather map shows you not only the flood watches that are out for this area, but the strong winds with this wind advisory in this area. Elsewhere around the country, got some dense fog early this morning in parts of the south central plains. I'll show you in a few minutes what we're anticipating here out west with some snowfall. Okay, so here's your rapid recap in this video, looking at the next 5 days of total accumulated precipitation. System number 1 slowly moves out today on Monday, getting out of here by this time on Tuesday. We do have a system to be watching that'll come through on Christmas Day, but primarily moving through this region the day after Christmas, bringing some light snow to parts of the Dakotas, but mainly into northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, and the UP of Michigan. And finally, with that deeper trough still sitting in this area, potential for some very heavy rainfall over parts of the desert southwest, but then ejecting here into the Four Corner states, looking at some snow adding up in that area. So let's get some of the rainfall totals through the next 5 days. And again, most of this coming here in the next 24 to 36 hours. We do have the potential in parts of South Carolina grabbing another 3 to 4 plus inches of rainfall. We'll have to watch it carefully today to see how much rainfall actually does target that state, but very, very wet in parts of the southeast. Coming over to the southwest with that strong onshore flow right here coming into the mountains that surround the LA basin, we could be seeing 2, 3, 4 inches of rainfall with some bigger snowfall amounts coming in right here into parts of the mountains that surround the San Joaquin Valley and again the LA basin. This also brings in some heavier rainfall amounts into parts of Arizona, getting into Utah, New Mexico, and into the mountains here in Colorado. Speaking of snow, let's just take a look at what we are looking at for the rest of this week. Starting here in the north central plains, some light snow possibly moving through parts of the Dakotas, but the heaviest of which will be here in parts of northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, and the UP of Michigan. So if your holiday travel takes you there to do some snowmobiling, hey, I got some fresh stuff coming down for you. But let's zoom in and take a look at what we are anticipating here over the southwest, because in and around California, now the elevations are relatively high here, but the potential exists for between 6 and in some locations well over 1.5 feet of snow, 6 inches to 1.5 feet of snow here in the mountains that surround the LA basin and also around here in the San Joaquin Valley, those mountains in that region. So we do have the potential for grabbing quite a bit of snow. Now what came through over the weekend did bring up some of our snowfall amounts in Oregon and Washington, and we desperately need that because this map, which shows us basin average snow water content, suggests that that is the region that is still in deficit so far this year, with much of the rest of our mountains still showing well above average on snow water content so far this year. So looking out beyond what we're anticipating this week, this is now looking only at days 4 through 10. So that week time period that begins on Friday going through the next Friday. Well, what's happening is we got a little trough that sneaks out here and gives us some great upper level support for producing systems that come out of the south central plains moving toward the Midwest. While that's happening, things are getting very dry here compared to normal here in the western and northwestern part of the United States as the jet stream takes aim on British Columbia. You'll see that in a few minutes. And even though we do get a bit of a drier time period here, I will tell you that area is going to go right back over to active once we get beyond that next 7 to 8 days. So looking only at week 2, so this is only the first week of the new year and the new decade. GFS ensemble is here, European ensemble is there. And I want you to keep this map in mind because you can see in both that it's going to be here in this region in Canada that seems to have the most action in terms of precipitation. Meanwhile, both models are trying to keep this corridor on the drier side of things. Again, we're now looking at January 1st through January 7th, but the European model, see how it's cluing in on a wetter pattern here? I'm going to tell you exactly why it's doing that in just a few seconds. Now, the story is best told in temperatures. Over the next 5 days, with the jet stream retreating north, with that big ridge building in, much above average temperatures, except for where the cutoff low starts off and then slowly moves here over the coming days. Much of the rest of the U.S. and central Canada very warm compared to normal. But look at this. This is days 5 through 10. And a key difference maker in our flow pattern of the jet stream is told right there in Alaska and in the Arctic. You see, that's where our biggest reservoir of cold air is going to be. And remember, when we talk about the position of the jet stream, it is always found between or over the top of our strongest temperature gradient. So where we're going from the warmest air here to the coldest air there, the jet stream squeezes right in between it. And that's going to complicate the forecast for the lower 48. Because without the strongest wind flow over us, here in the lower 48, in the Canadian prairies, we are not going to have strong upper level support for the development and movement of low pressure systems. So expect major model discrepancies. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Take a look at this. Coldest air here, now looking at the first week of January. You can see that the jet stream comes right around the base of that. It takes aim on British Columbia. Meanwhile, the flow across the United States, look at how weak this is. Here comes the subtropical branch of the jet stream, which means any system that forms lifts toward the north and east. That keeps the cold air to the north. That allows the west coast to dry out, which I know they don't want to do, but that's what's going to happen. And the main flow stays south of Alaska. That is the critical piece of information understanding the rest of this forecast for the northern hemisphere. With that rapid recap out of the way, let's look at the details. Now, over the next 48 to 60 hours, we're going to watch two things. First is going to be this system taking aim primarily on South Carolina. Secondly, watch the stream of moisture coming into the LA basin and then eventually working its way into the Four Corner states. The rest of the country, getting through the next 60 hours, relatively uneventful. Just another little weak front that comes in here into the Pacific Northwest. So let's play this one forward. And this is what we have by the time we get into mid-morning on Monday. It's exactly as we anticipated. Strong onshore flow into the LA basin. We have South Carolina targeted with the heaviest rain, and that's going to last throughout the afternoon and evening hours on Monday. Now getting you into Tuesday morning, here we go. This is Tuesday morning. First low off the coast. Second one slowly pushing into Arizona. and the Four Corner States, putting in some snow into the Colorado Rockies here. And as we get into, take a look at this. This is now 10 p.m. on Christmas Eve, getting into 6 a.m. Christmas morning. Now, I couldn't be happier to show you a map like this because this to me spells a lot lower risk in terms of travel across the country with our weather systems early on Christmas morning. And what we're going to watch after that, well, let's take a look here by understanding the upper levels of the atmosphere. We have this weak trough that sneaks through on Christmas Day. That's what brings the snow in and around this region on the day after Christmas. We're next going to watch this trough slowly push here, and that's going to be the one that brings in some unsettled weather once we get beyond the end of this week. Okay, so let's talk about it, because by the time I get you out to Saturday morning, that trough is right in through here. Now, with the broader ridge out ahead of it, best upper level support is right in through this area for the development below. But this is why the forecast is so tricky. This trough is not connected, it is not anchored to a deep reservoir of cold air. Remember, the jet stream's up here. And as a result, this is going to be a tricky one to forecast as it moves across the country. So let me show you some of those details here. And to do that, I want to show you the GFS on the left versus the European on the right. And wait until you see these model differences. The GFS is much more progressive, much quicker with the next systems coming through. And watch how the ECMWF hangs everything back farther. Now, the models agree about everything, getting up until early Christmas morning. So take a look at this. This is now showing up here at this is 6 a.m. on the 25th. Both models say, yep, there's going to be a low that'll be sitting right in here in Colorado with some snow here in the Colorado Rockies. But what they do is they bring that out and take it up toward the UP of Michigan by, this is 6 a.m. on the 26th. And so the light snow comes back into the Dakotas and into the northern part of Minnesota and Wisconsin and also into parts of Michigan. But with this system lifting, maybe some cold rain up here at this time, given how warm things are going to be on the 24th, 25th, and 26th. Also, we may get some snow it may even get back into parts of northern Nebraska, but I don't know too much about how far to the south it'll get from there. Here's where the story really begins to diverge. You see this low here coming into, well, LA Basin? Watch what the GFS does over here on the left compared to the European on the right. Ready? As we move forward, the GFS cranks that low straight into Arizona by Friday morning. What does the European do? Leaves it over the Baja. So watch the differences. This is now Saturday morning. You see, the European hangs everything back. Widespread rain through the south central plains with snow in New Mexico and southern Colorado. With the more progressive GFS, it's now got a low over parts of Missouri, widespread rain over Illinois, and snow in Iowa, coming back into Nebraska and into Kansas, and then also into the the plains here of Colorado. You see, the European being slower has none of this. In fact, it slowly lets the system come out, and this take you all the way to Sunday morning. Look at how much quicker the GFS yanked that system across the United States, already building in high pressure behind it, and the European has it still sitting here. This is a 1,000-mile difference in the models on the position of this low. That is a huge discrepancy. And I know that I almost always side with the European model in this, but because the flow is so weak aloft, I think that upper level trough will be slower. And we're going to watch this week to see how this actually unfolds, to see which model actually had this pinned down right. But let's get this on out here, because by the time we get into the weekend, finishing up on Monday morning, that's when the European model finally lets this system come out. Holy smokes, what a major difference between our two modeling centers here. Now, after that, as that system pulls through, both models say, let's calm things down for January 1st. So this would be 6 a.m. on January 1st, showing you that at this time, the European wants to bring a stronger system up the East Coast. But both models say, hey, high pressure should build in behind all of this and leave things relatively benign for that day. Okay, so with that, let's turn things over to temperatures and take a look at what to expect here. So here's high temperatures for the day today. Look at the widespread 70s through parts of Texas, getting up into the central plains here. Wow, that's going to be nice. As we play this one forward, let's get you out into Tuesday. So this is the 24th. Look at the temperatures here. Widespread 70s, 50s coming up into parts of the Ohio River Valley, into Illinois, even over into southern Iowa. Why does it stay cold here in the north central plains? A lot of snow on the ground still here. And in the Pacific Northwest, we do hang on to the cooler bias as the trough is to our south. But this is what things are going to look like on the 25th. We see widespread 70s across the southern region, getting up into Kansas, Missouri. We have 60s, even into Illinois, southern Illinois, 50s and 60s. But the colder air, north central plains and back here into parts of the Intermountain West. Now, by the way, to hit 25 degrees here on the 25th, I mean, this is going to feel warm compared to what we have seen in the north central plains, especially going back over the last couple of weeks. Well, this is Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And that's about the time period where the upper level trough is ejecting here. And it'll be right here along this temperature gradient that we see much of our precipitation as we get into the weekend. Okay, just want to show you one last thing here. This is for Christmas Day, the 25th. These are the departures from normal. Look at the differences from normal in the temperatures in the midsection of the United States. That is pretty amazing. Okay, let's continue with our story. Take a look at this. As I get you out here to the 5 to 10 day time period, look at that cold over Alaska. Remember, the jet stream is always found over the tightest temperature gradient, which is why it's hanging out up here in Canada. And just to show you something amazing about Alaska, this is the first time, not only going back to September 23rd, but honestly going back to the beginning of the year, that Alaska has seen a sustained time period of below normal temperatures. And it's going to continue all the way into the beginning of January. Now remember, we have a rule of thumb. Whatever's going on in Alaska is almost always the opposite of what's going on here in the central part of the United States. And because much of this year Alaska spent the temperature above average, we saw, well, near average to cooler than average in the midsection of the United States. Well, this seems to be our new pattern. And until that jet stream pattern gets away from that region, well, we're not going to see much of a change. And taking you all the way out here to the evening of January 1st, with a deep trough sitting over the North Pole and ridging here and ridging there, well, the Arctic oscillation goes positive, the North Atlantic oscillation goes positive, and if the AO is positive, we are typically not cold in the lower 48. If the NAO is positive, we're typically not cold over the eastern half of the United States. And these two features go positive and they want to stay there. And that's because there's no support even in the stratosphere for this. Over the next 10 days, the polar vortex is wanting to move over parts of the Arctic, over parts of Siberia, and stay relatively strong. And remember, weak polar vortexes let air spill south. Strong polar vortexes keep all the cold tucked away right in through here. So that's how the polar vortex is behaving. It's not helping out with the dislodging of that cold air in Alaska. And therefore, what's the jet stream going to do? It's going to do this and that. You see, we have a polar branch of the jet stream taking aim on British Columbia and a subtropical piece coming up just like this. And that is going to be our major setup as we work our way into the new decade here. And so what does it do? Targets all the precipitation here. And notice this. That region there will become active into week 2. So with systems lifting, it's hard to get cold air to penetrate and stick around into the eastern 2/3 of the United States. Now let's talk about elsewhere around the planet, because right now the next 10 days for parts of Brazil feature wetter than average conditions in Brazil's northern growing regions, including Mato Grosso, with drier conditions here in and around Paraná. So this includes Mato Grosso do Sul, which is here, Goiás, Tocantins, Minas Gerais, which is there, and even down into Rio Grande do Sul, which is to the south. Over the next 10 days, we're going to watch Argentina very closely as the models are forecasting wetter than average conditions. And as we finish up this video, here's some of the major things that we need to be talking about as we progress into the new year. 1, the Indian Ocean Dipole event that had happened is going to no longer be a part of our story. Everything is going to shift over to us paying attention to the Mad-Julian Oscillation. It's currently sitting in null phase, but it will move out into phase 6 and then eventually come over into phases 7 and 8. Remember this with me. Phases 7, 8, 1, and 2, these are the cooler phases for North America. They are the wetter phases for Brazil. Phases 3, 4, 5, and 6 are the warmer phases these are the drier phases. Got to get this right. These are the drier phases for Brazil, especially phase 5, and some of the warmer phases for North America. Now, it's going to take time. Maybe the next 15 days it'll take to come out over here, which is why, because these other features are so weak right now, that we're going to be having to watch the MJO to control both our weather in the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere. All right? Now, there's one last thing I want to talk about, and that is this right here, WWB, westerly wind bursts. With the fading of the Indian Ocean dipole, we are seeing a strong westerly wind burst, which is faking out a little weak El Nino-like feature. And that is why we see we're going to have a strong jet stream here that's going to, well, hang on, the subtropical branch of it at least, into the first week of January. I don't see a transition in this pattern probably until after we finish the first week of January. So what we just talked about today, it's going to be on wash, rinse, repeat for quite some time. All right? With that, I'll go ahead and wrap up this forecast video and hope that you all have a great week. Travel safely, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Thank you.